The first time I noticed Roman staying over too often, it was because of the coffee. My sister never drank coffee after 8 p.m., said it made her anxious and weirdly emotional, which honestly tracked. But suddenly, every morning, there was an extra mug in the sink. Black coffee, no sugar, strong enough to smell across the kitchen. Roman's coffee. At first, I didn't think much about it. My sister, Ava, had been dating him for almost a year. He was around a lot already. Tall, calm, stupidly good-looking in that effortless way some people are without trying. Dark hair that always looked messy in a deliberate way. Deep voice. The kind of guy moms loved instantly and strangers trusted for directions. And annoyingly, he was nice. That was the problem. If he'd been arrogant or loud, or one of those fake charming guys who called everyone buddy, I probably would have kept my distance. But Roman was easy to be around. Quiet without being awkward. Funny when he actually chose to talk. The kind of person who remembered small things about you without making it obvious. Which meant I noticed when he started staying over 3 nights a week. Then 4. Then basically every night. You know he doesn't actually live here, right? I asked Ava one morning while digging through the fridge. She looked up from her phone. You complaining? I'm observing. You're dramatic, she muttered. Maybe I was. But our apartment wasn't huge. 2 bedrooms. Thin walls. Tiny kitchen. There's only so much guest energy one place can hold before it starts feeling permanent. And Roman had permanent energy. His hoodie appeared over the back of the couch. His shoes stayed by the front door. His shampoo somehow migrated into our bathroom like it had signed a lease agreement. The weirdest part was how natural it felt, like he'd always been there. One Friday night, Ava got called into work unexpectedly. Some emergency shift. She worked at a veterinary clinic and apparently someone's bulldog had eaten part of a tennis ball. I'll only be gone a couple hours, she told Roman while grabbing her keys. Then she looked at me. Don't be weird. I'm never weird. You're literally weird right now. Roman laughed quietly from the kitchen counter where he was making tea. That laugh did something annoying to my chest. I ignored it immediately. After Ava left, the apartment got quieter than usual. Not awkward quiet. Just unfamiliar. Roman stayed leaning against the counter while steam curled from his mug. You want tea too? He asked. No thanks. You sure? Are you emotionally attached to making tea for people? A small smile pulled at his mouth. Little bit. I should have gone to my room. Instead, I stayed. We ended up talking for almost 2 hours. At first, it was stupid stuff. Movies. Music. Why our apartment building always smelled faintly like burnt toast. But somewhere in the middle of it, the conversation shifted into something calmer. Easier. Roman had that effect on people. When he paid attention to you, it felt complete. No checking his phone every 30 seconds. No fake listening. He looked directly at you like what you were saying mattered. Which made me hyper-aware every time his eyes landed on me. You and Ava are really different, he said at one point. I snorted. That's the nicest possible way you could have said that. I mean it in a good way. How? He shrugged slightly. She fills space immediately. You wait first. That sounds fake deep. He laughed again. Okay, you're more guarded. That one landed too accurately. I crossed my arms. And you figured that out tonight? No, he said softly. I noticed a while ago. Something tightened unexpectedly in my stomach. The apartment suddenly felt warmer. I stood up too fast. I should probably sleep. Roman looked up at me from the couch. Calm. Relaxed. Completely unaware of the small crisis happening internally 6 feet away from him. Night, Zachary. Night. I escaped to my room, feeling weirdly off balance. And the worst part? I kept replaying his voice, saying my name long after I shut the door. The problem with attraction is that once you notice it, everything becomes evidence. Roman leaning against the kitchen counter? Evidence. Roman laughing at something I said like it genuinely surprised him? Evidence. Roman walking out of the bathroom with damp hair and a sleepy expression on a Sunday morning? Extremely unfortunate evidence. I hated myself a little for it. Not because Roman was a guy. That part wasn't exactly new information to me. Ava knew I liked men. Most people close to me did. It wasn't some dramatic secret. The problem was that Roman was Ava's boyfriend, which automatically placed him in the category of absolutely not. So naturally, my brain became obsessed with him. For the next couple weeks, I avoided being alone with him as much as possible, which should have been easy. Except Roman was suddenly everywhere. If I cooked, he wandered into the kitchen halfway through. If I watched something in the living room, he somehow ended up sitting on the other end of the couch. If I came home late from work, there he was, barefoot in sweatpants, saying, "Hey, Zach," in that low, sleepy voice that absolutely needed to stop affecting me immediately. One night, Ava fell asleep early during a movie, completely knocked out, head against Roman's shoulder. I stood up quietly to head to my room, but Roman glanced over. "You're leaving?" "Yeah. The movie's almost over." I looked at Ava, asleep on him like she belonged there. Which she did. "Think I'm good," I replied. Something unreadable crossed his expression for a second. Then he nodded. "Sleep well." I barely slept at all, because my brain had started doing this dangerous thing where it separated Roman into two versions. Roman, Ava's boyfriend, and Roman, the guy who looked at me too carefully sometimes. I tried convincing myself I imagined that second version. Then came the night that ruined everything. Ava was away visiting a friend from college for the weekend. Just 2 days. No big deal. Roman still showed up Friday night. I opened the apartment door and blinked at him. "You know Ava's not here, right?" He held up a grocery bag. "She said I could still come over." "That's weird. She also said you forget to eat actual meals unless supervised." Wow. Betrayal. Roman smiled slightly and walked inside like this was normal. And somehow, against all logic, it became normal frighteningly fast. We cooked together. While he cooked, I mostly hovered nearby, pretending I understood seasoning. At one point, he reached around me to grab something from the cabinet, and his arm brushed mine. Just an accident. Barely contact at all. Still, my entire body locked up. Roman noticed instantly. His eyes flicked to my face. "Sorry," he said quietly. "It's fine." But the air changed after that. Subtle. Charcoal. Like both of us suddenly became aware of the space between us. We ate dinner on the couch. Some terrible action movie playing in the background neither of us paid attention to. Then, somewhere around midnight, the power went out. The whole apartment dropped into darkness. "Oh, come on," I groaned. Roman laughed softly nearby. "You scared?" "No, just annoyed." "You sure?" "Yes." A beat of silence. Then, your voice got higher. I threw a pillow at him blindly in the dark. He caught it immediately. "Wow," he said. "Violent. You deserve it." The storm outside got louder. Rain against windows. Thunder somewhere close. Roman used his phone flashlight to find candles in the kitchen while I stood nearby, pretending I wasn't watching him too much. Soft light changed everything. Made the apartment feel smaller somehow. More intimate. At one point, he glanced over at me across the counter and went still for half a second. Not dramatic. Just enough to notice. And for the first time since all of this started, I had the terrifying realization that maybe I wasn't imagining things after all. Maybe Roman felt it too. And that was so much worse. I spent the entire next day avoiding Roman. Not obviously, just strategically. If he was in the kitchen, suddenly I needed laundry. If he sat in the living room, I remembered an urgent email I absolutely did not have to send. By Saturday afternoon, I was basically hiding in my own apartment like a pathetic little Victorian man with forbidden feelings. Roman noticed. Of course he did. That evening, I came out of my room to grab water and nearly walked straight into him in the hallway. "Jesus. Sorry," he said immediately, though he didn't move away right away either. The hallway suddenly felt way too narrow. "You okay?" he asked. "Why wouldn't I be?" He tilted his head slightly. "You've barely looked at me all day." My grip tightened around the glass in my hand. "Maybe I'm busy." "Zachary." The way he said my full name should have been illegal. I forced myself to meet his eyes. Big mistake. Roman looked calm, but not casual. There was tension sitting underneath his expression now. Awareness. Like he'd spent the entire day thinking too. "I think we should pretend last night didn't happen," I said quickly. A pause. "Nothing happened," he replied. "That's exactly why we should pretend." For a second, I thought he might smile. Instead, he looked at me in this quiet, searching way that made my chest feel tight. "You really think that's possible?" he asked softly. I swallowed hard. "No," I admitted. Silence stretched between us. The apartment hummed faintly around us, the refrigerator, rain still tapping lightly against windows, distant traffic outside. Then Roman stepped back first. "Okay," he said carefully. "Then we should probably be smart." That word hit harder than it should have. Smart. Right. Because nothing had technically happened yet. No lines crossed. No betrayal. Just tension thick enough to choke on. "I'm going out for a while," I muttered. Roman nodded once. "Probably a good idea." I walked for almost 2 hours that night. No destination. Just movement. trying to outrun the fact that somewhere along the way, Roman had stopped feeling like Ava's boyfriend and started feeling like something dangerously personal. And worse, part of me thought he was fighting the exact same thing. When I got back to the apartment, his shoes were gone. That should have relieved me. Instead, disappointment hit first, which was deeply humiliating. Ava came home Sunday afternoon completely unaware that her apartment had turned into an emotional war zone while she was gone. "You guys survive without me?" she asked, dropping her bag dramatically onto the couch. "Barely," I replied. Roman looked up from his phone. "Zach almost starved." "That's slander." Ava laughed and disappeared into her room. The second she was gone, silence dropped heavily between us. I could feel Roman deliberately not looking at me, which somehow made me aware of him even more. Over the next week, things got worse. Not because anything happened, because nothing did. Roman became careful around me. Too careful. No accidental touches. No lingering conversations late at night. No sitting too close on the couch. It should have helped. Instead, it felt like standing too close to a live wire while pretending not to notice the electricity. Then Thursday night happened. Ava was out again, this time just dinner with coworkers. I was making pasta badly when Roman walked into the kitchen. He paused after a second. "You know the pan's too hot, right?" "I'm aware of my choices." "You're burning garlic." "I like flavor." Roman laughed under his breath and stepped closer to the stove. "Move. I can cook." "Zachary." Again with the full name. I stepped aside reluctantly while Roman fixed the disaster I'd created in under 30 seconds. "You're annoyingly competent," I muttered. "Thank you." That wasn't a compliment. His mouth twitched slightly. We stood there shoulder to shoulder in the tiny kitchen while the pasta boiled. Too close. Way too close. Then Roman spoke without looking at me. "I almost left that night." I froze. "The storm night?" I asked carefully. "Yeah." The kitchen suddenly felt very quiet. "I got to the door twice," he continued softly. "Couldn't make myself do it." My pulse started hammering immediately. "Roman." "I know," he said quickly. "I know this is bad timing and unfair and probably selfish." I stared at him. He finally looked over. And there it was. Not imagined. Not one-sided. Roman looked at me the way people look at something they're trying very hard not to want. "You're my sister's boyfriend," I said quietly, like saying it out loud might fix this somehow. Pain flickered briefly across his face. "I know." "Then why are you telling me this?" A long silence followed. Then Roman leaned back against the counter and exhaled slowly. "Because I think about you constantly," he admitted. Every thought in my head stopped. "You shouldn't say things like that." "I know." "Roman, I haven't touched you," he said firmly. "I haven't crossed a line. But pretending nothing's happening feels dishonest at this point." My chest hurt. Because part of me had wanted this. Wanted confirmation. Wanted proof I wasn't crazy for noticing the tension between us. But reality felt so much heavier than fantasy. "What about Ava?" I asked finally. That question seemed to hit him hardest. Roman looked away immediately. And somehow, that was my answer. After that conversation, Roman started leaving earlier. That was the first thing I noticed. Before, he'd stay until midnight on work nights, half asleep on our couch, while Ava watched terrible reality TV. Now he found reasons to go home. Early meeting. Laundry. Forgot something at his apartment. None of it fooled me. He was trying to create distance, which honestly would have been helpful if my brain wasn't doing the exact opposite. The worst part was how normal Ava remained through all of it. She still leaned against him absent-mindedly while talking. Still smiled automatically when he walked into a room. Still loved him openly, comfortably, without hesitation. Every time I saw it, guilt hit so hard it made my stomach hurt. Because Ava trusted both of us. And somehow that made everything between Roman and me feel uglier, even though technically nothing had happened. Yet, one Tuesday night, Ava fell asleep early again. I was in the kitchen pretending to study something on my laptop when Roman quietly covered her with a blanket from the couch. The gesture was so gentle it physically hurt to watch. He noticed me looking. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then he walked into the kitchen. "You should hate me," I said before he could speak. Roman went still. "Zachary, I mean it." I shut the laptop harder than necessary. "This is insane." His jaw tightened slightly. "I know. Then why does it feel like you're not stopping it?" That landed. Roman leaned both hands against the counter and looked down for a long moment before answering. "Because I don't know how." His honesty was infuriating. "You could break up with her." The second the words left my mouth, guilt slammed into me. Roman looked up immediately. Something conflicted moved across his face. You think that's what this is? He asked quietly. I don't know what this is. Neither did he. That was obvious. Roman looked exhausted suddenly, like he hadn't slept properly in days. I care about Ava, he said carefully. But his silence answered for him again. I laughed once under my breath, though nothing about this felt funny anymore. That's horrible. I know. You're in love with my sister and emotionally cheating on her with me. Roman flinched at that. Because it was true. And maybe because neither of us had said it that clearly before. I haven't done anything, he said quietly. Roman, I haven't. You told me you think about me constantly. His expression tightened. Would it honestly make this better if I lied instead? No. That was the problem. Everything between us felt painfully honest. That night, after Roman left, I sat awake until almost 3 a.m. replaying every moment from the last few months. Every look, every conversation, every strange pause. And slowly, horribly, a realization started settling into place. Roman hadn't fallen for me suddenly. This had been building for a while, maybe longer than either of us wanted to admit. The next weekend, Ava convinced both of us to go with her to a friend's birthday party, which sounded like psychological torture immediately. You're being dramatic, she told me while getting ready. I'm being intuitive. You're being single for too long. If only she knew. Roman arrived 20 minutes later wearing a dark button-up that immediately ruined my evening. He looked unfairly good, and judging by the brief way his eyes stalled on me when I opened the door, I apparently looked decent too. Great. Fantastic. Exactly what this situation needed. The party itself was loud and crowded and deeply unpleasant. At least for me, because Roman kept accidentally ending up near me. At the drinks table, near the balcony, in the kitchen, like some invisible magnet was actively trying to destroy all three of our lives. At one point, Ava disappeared to the bathroom, leaving me alone beside Roman near the hallway. You okay? He asked quietly over the music. Not particularly. A faint, tired smile crossed his face. Same. I looked away first. You should go back to her. Roman's voice dropped lower. Zachary. Seriously. She's talking with friends. That's not what I meant. Silence. Heavy and immediate. Then Roman stepped slightly closer. Not enough for anyone else to notice. Enough for me to feel it. I've been trying to stay away from you, he admitted quietly. Every nerve ending in my body lit up instantly. You're doing a terrible job. I know. God. The honesty again. Always the honesty. I glanced toward the bathroom hallway instinctively. Roman, someone's going to notice. His eyes flicked briefly to my mouth before returning to my eyes. I think they already would have, he said softly. That hit like a punch. Because suddenly I realized maybe we hadn't been subtle at all. Maybe tension this intense leaked into rooms whether you wanted it to or not. Footsteps approached down the hallway. Roman stepped back immediately. Ava appeared seconds later smiling at both of us completely normally. And guilt crashed over me so hard I almost couldn't breathe. On the drive home, Ava fell asleep in the backseat rideshare. Roman sat beside me in silence. The city lights flashed across his face every few seconds. Neither of us looked at each other once. But halfway home, his hand shifted slightly on the seat between us, close enough for our fingers to brush accidentally. Neither of us moved away, and somehow that tiny moment felt more dangerous than anything else so far. After the party, Roman stopped touching me completely. No accidental brushes. No standing too close. No quiet conversations in the kitchen after Ava went to sleep. Nothing. And somehow, that hurt worse. Because now I knew it wasn't accidental before. He was controlling it deliberately. The apartment started feeling tense in this unbearable, silent way. Ava noticed something was off almost immediately. You two fight or something? She asked one evening while we ate takeout on the couch. Roman answered before I could. No. Too fast. Ava narrowed her eyes slightly. Okay. I forced myself to sound normal. He's just stressed. Roman glanced at me briefly. The look lasted maybe half a second. Still enough to make my pulse jump. Later that night, I heard voices through Ava's bedroom wall. Not arguments. Worse. Soft conversation. Laughing. Intimacy. Reality. I sat on my bed staring at the wall feeling physically sick with myself. Because Roman wasn't mine to miss. He wasn't mine at all. The next morning, I decided something had to change. This couldn't keep happening. So I waited until Ava left for work and cornered Roman in the kitchen. We need boundaries. Roman looked exhausted immediately, like he'd expected this conversation for days. Okay, you can't keep staying here. Pain flickered across his expression before he hit it. If that's what you want, it's what needs to happen. Silence settled heavily between us. Roman nodded once. You're probably right. Probably right. The fact that he sounded sad about it nearly destroyed my resolve instantly. I mean it, I added quieter now. This is hurting her. That hit hardest. Roman looked down at the counter for several long seconds. Then he said something so quietly I almost missed it. I know. God. I hated how guilty he sounded. I hated how guilty I sounded. Mostly, I hated that despite everything, part of me still wanted him near me anyway. Roman grabbed his keys slowly. I'll give you guys space. You don't have to disappear. A strange look crossed his face at that. Zachary, he said softly. I think disappearing might actually be the safest option. Then he left, and the apartment immediately felt emptier, which was such a horrible thing to notice that I nearly laughed at myself. Over the next week, Roman barely came over. Ava complained constantly. I swear he's avoiding me. I nearly choked on my coffee the first time she said it. You're probably imagining it. I'm not. She frowned at her phone. He's being weird. The guilt became unbearable after that, because Ava looked genuinely hurt. And Roman stupidly, painfully honest Roman was probably pulling away because I asked him to. One Friday night, Ava went out with coworkers. I stayed home intentionally. I needed quiet. Around 11 p.m., someone knocked on the apartment door. I already knew who it was before opening it. Roman stood there looking tired. Not drunk. Not emotional. Just exhausted. What are you doing here? I asked immediately. I need to talk to you. Every instinct in my body screamed this was a terrible idea. I still stepped aside. Roman walked in slowly, eyes scanning the apartment automatically. She's out. Yes. A long silence followed. Then Roman exhaled sharply and rubbed a hand over his face. I broke up with her. Everything inside me stopped. What? His eyes lifted to mine finally. We broke up tonight. The room tilted slightly. Roman, she deserves someone fully there, he said quietly. And I realized I haven't been for a while. My chest hurt instantly. Did you tell her about me? No. Relief and guilt crashed together so hard it made me dizzy. Roman leaned against the kitchen counter looking wrecked. She thinks I've been distant because work's been stressful. That's worse. I know. Silence. Heavy. Complicated. Awful. Then Roman looked directly at me. And before you ask, no, I didn't break up with her because I think this magically fixes everything. That mattered more than I expected. I care about her, he continued softly. A lot. Which is why this feels terrible. I swallowed hard. How did she take it? His jaw tightened. Not well. Of course not. Because breakups are brutal even without secret feelings involved. And this breakup had secret feelings all over it. I suddenly couldn't look at him anymore. This was a mistake, I muttered. Roman went still. Coming here. All of it. For a second, hurt flashed openly across his face. Then he nodded slowly. Yeah, he said quietly. Maybe. That should have ended the conversation. Instead, neither of us moved. The apartment felt too small again. Roman looked exhausted and guilty and heartbreakingly sad. And despite everything, despite Ava, despite the timing, despite the absolute mess of this situation, the only thing I could think was, I wanted to comfort him, which made me feel like the worst person alive. Roman must have seen something on my face because his expression softened suddenly. Zachary, he said quietly, you don't have to carry all of this by yourself. I laughed once under my breath. That's a crazy thing to say considering you caused half of it. A tiny smile appeared despite everything. Fair. God. Even now, he could still make me want to move closer instead of farther away. And that was the real problem all along. Roman stayed for almost an hour that night. Not because either of us wanted drama. Honestly, it was the opposite. We sat at opposite ends of the couch speaking quietly, like if we kept our voices low enough, maybe the situation itself would become less real. It didn't. I hate this, I admitted finally. Roman looked over at me. Me too. You hurt her. The words came out sharper than I intended. He nodded immediately. I know. No defensiveness. No excuses. That somehow made it worse. I never wanted this to happen, he said quietly. I laughed once under my breath. That sounds fake considering everything. Roman's expression tightened slightly. You think I wanted to fall for my girlfriend's brother? Silence. That was the first time either of us had called it what it was. Fall for. Not attraction. Not tension. Something heavier. Something impossible to pretend away anymore. My chest felt painfully tight. You shouldn't say things like that. I know, he repeated softly. God. Always honest. Always too honest. Roman leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on his knees. I tried to stop it, he admitted. For months. Months. The word hit hard. Because I'd been secretly hoping this whole thing started recently. Suddenly. Accidentally. Months meant something deeper. Something worse. I stared at the floor. When Roman was quiet for a second. Probably around winter. My stomach dropped immediately. Winter. That meant all those late-night conversations. The teasing. The way he'd looked at me sometimes when Ava wasn't paying attention. None of it had been innocent. Why didn't you leave her then? Roman closed his eyes briefly. Because I loved her. Past tense. I noticed immediately. Maybe he realized it too because his jaw tightened afterward. And because, he continued carefully, I thought this would pass if I ignored it. Clearly great strategy. A tired laugh escaped him. Yeah, really worked out. The apartment fell quiet again. Rain tapped lightly against the windows outside. Roman looked exhausted in a way that went beyond the breakup. Like he'd been fighting himself for too long. You should go home, I said eventually. His eyes lifted to mine immediately. You want me to? That question carried entirely too much weight. Because the truthful answer was complicated. Part of me desperately wanted him to stay. Another part wanted him gone before things became even more unforgivable. I don't know what I want, I admitted quietly. Roman looked at me for a very long time after that. Then he stood slowly. That makes two of us. He grabbed his jacket from the arm of the couch. At the door, he hesitated. I should have looked away. Instead, we both just stood there staring at each other in the dim apartment light. And suddenly the space between us felt unbearable. Roman noticed it too. I saw it happen in real time, that tiny shift in his expression. Restraint slipping. Zachary, he said softly. My pulse immediately kicked harder. What? He swallowed once. Then, quietly. If I touch you right now, I don't think I'll stop. Every thought in my head disappeared instantly. The room felt dangerously still. Roman looked almost angry at himself for saying it. You should leave, I whispered. He nodded immediately, but neither of us moved. That was the terrifying part. Because despite everything Ava, the breakup, the guilt hanging all over this apartment, there was still this unbearable pull between us. Neither of us seemed capable of resisting completely. Roman's eyes dropped briefly to my mouth before lifting again. And that tiny movement shattered whatever control I still had left. I crossed the room before I could think better of it. The second I stopped in front of him, Roman inhaled sharply. Zachary. I know, I said quickly. I know this is bad. His hand twitched slightly at his side like he was physically stopping himself from reaching for me. You're emotional right now, he said carefully. And guilty. And I just ended things with your sister. I'm aware. Then maybe we shouldn't. I know, I interrupted again. But neither of us stepped back. Roman looked wrecked. Not manipulative. Not triumphant. Just overwhelmed in the exact same way I felt. I've wanted to kiss you for months, he admitted quietly. That did it. Completely. Because I had spent so long convincing myself this feeling was one-sided. Shameful. Imagined. And hearing the truth out loud shattered something open inside me. Roman touched my wrist first. Gentle. Careful. Like he was giving me one final chance to stop this. I didn't. When we kissed, it felt less like a decision and more like finally losing a fight both of us were exhausted from having. Slow at first. Uncertain. Then immediately too real. Roman pulled away after only a few seconds, breathing unevenly. His forehead rested briefly against mine. This is a disaster, he whispered. Yeah. Neither of us sounded convincing. Because despite the guilt clawing at me already, despite Ava's face flashing through my head immediately afterward, I had never wanted anyone this badly in my life. And Roman clearly knew it. The second Roman kissed me, everything became real. Not fantasy. Not tension. Not stolen looks across the kitchen. Real. And reality felt terrifying almost immediately. Roman stepped back first like he'd burned himself. His breathing was uneven. Mine probably looked just as bad. We can't do that again, he said instantly. I stared at him. You literally kissed me back. And it was a mistake. The words hit harder than they should have. Not because I thought he regretted me. Because I knew he was trying to do damage control in real time. You don't mean that, I said quietly. Roman closed his eyes briefly. That's the problem. Silence crashed heavily between us. The guilt finally hit full force after the adrenaline faded. Ava. Jesus Christ. Ava had spent a year loving him while this thing quietly grew underneath everything. And now, less than 24 hours after their breakup, I was kissing him in our apartment. I stepped back immediately. We're awful people. Roman looked genuinely pained by that. Zachary. No, seriously. I ran both hands through my hair. What the hell are we doing? He didn't answer. Because there wasn't a good answer. Roman looked toward the door again like he wanted to leave, but didn't fully trust himself to. That shouldn't have happened, he said quietly. I laughed bitterly. You've said that about basically every stage of this. Because every stage keeps getting worse. That was fair. Painfully fair. Roman looked at me for another long second before finally stepping away completely. I'm going home. This time, he actually left. And I immediately felt the absence of him like something physical, which was deeply, deeply pathetic. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I replayed the kiss. Roman's hand on my wrist. The way he said my name afterward. The fact that despite all the guilt flooding through me, part of me still wanted it again immediately. The next morning, Ava knocked on my bedroom door. You alive? Barely. Yeah. She walked in carrying coffee and sat beside me on the bed. I feel weird, she admitted quietly. My chest tightened instantly. Because of course she did. She'd just been broken up with. And meanwhile her brother had spent part of the night kissing her ex-boyfriend. I felt sick. Ava. She said my name carefully. Did Roman tell you why? My entire body went cold. What do you mean? The breakup. She shrugged weakly. He kept saying he wasn't fully there anymore. Guilt hit so hard I almost couldn't breathe. And honestly, she continued quietly, staring down into her coffee. I think I felt that for a while. That hurt unexpectedly. Because suddenly this stopped feeling like one catastrophic moment and started feeling like a slow collapse neither of them knew how to stop. I think he still cares about me, she said softly. Just maybe not the way he used to. I couldn't speak. Because technically, she was right. And somehow that made it worse. Ava sighed and leaned against my shoulder briefly. You'd tell me if he did something shitty, right? Every muscle in my body locked instantly. What? I don't know. She gave a small sad laugh. Cheated or something. The room felt dangerously hot all of a sudden. No, I said immediately. Too immediately. Ava looked up at me strangely for half a second, then thankfully looked away again. I don't think he did, she admitted quietly. Roman's not like that. The guilt nearly crushed me alive right there. Because technically, maybe he wasn't. But emotionally? Emotionally, we crossed lines weeks ago. Months ago, maybe. And now I was sitting beside my heartbroken sister, lying directly to her face. After she left my room, I stared at the wall for almost 10 straight minutes. Then my phone buzzed. Roman. Just seeing his name made my pulse jump painfully. Roman. How's Ava? I almost threw the phone across the room. Because of course he cared. That was the tragedy of all this. Roman wasn't some manipulative asshole playing games with both of us. He genuinely loved Ava. And somehow genuinely wanted me too. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. Zachary. Sad. 3 dots appeared instantly. Roman. Yeah. Another pause. Roman. I'm sorry. I didn't know who he was apologizing for anymore. Her. Me. Us. Everything. That night, Ava cried quietly in her room. And for the first time since all this started, I genuinely hated myself more than I wanted Roman. For 3 days, Roman and I didn't speak. Not really. A couple short texts about Ava. That was it. And honestly, the distance should have helped. Instead, it made everything worse. Because now there was space for reality to settle in fully. I had kissed my sister's ex-boyfriend less than a day after their breakup. Roman had emotionally fallen for me while dating her. And Ava still had absolutely no idea. I stopped sleeping properly after that. Every sound in the apartment made me tense, expecting Ava to somehow magically figure everything out just by looking at me too long. She didn't. If anything, she got softer around me. Sad. Quieter. More withdrawn. Which somehow made the guilt even harder to survive. Thursday night, I found her sitting alone on the balcony wrapped in a blanket. You okay? I asked carefully. Ava shrugged. I miss him. The honesty in her voice nearly broke me. I sat beside her quietly. He really loved you, you know? I said before I could stop myself. That part was true. Ava smiled weakly at the floor. That almost makes it harder. I looked over at her. What do you mean? He looked at me like he wanted to love me forever, she admitted softly. Then one day it just changed. Jesus Christ. I felt physically sick. Because I knew exactly when it changed. Winter. Roman said winter. Which meant while Ava was happily planning weekend trips and future apartments and talking about him to all her friends, Roman was quietly falling apart over me. I think there was someone else, Ava said suddenly. Every muscle in my body froze. What? She looked down at her hands. Not cheating exactly. I don't think Roman would physically cheat. Physically. That word hit like a knife. But emotionally, she continued softly. I don't know. I couldn't breathe correctly anymore. Ava. He'd disappear sometimes, she admitted. Not literally. Just mentally. Like part of him was somewhere else. Because it was. With me. The guilt became unbearable so fast I had to stand up suddenly. You okay? She asked immediately. Yeah. My voice sounded wrong even to me. Just tired. I escaped back inside before she could look at me too carefully. That night, I texted Roman for the first time in days. Zachary, we need to stop this completely. The typing bubble appeared almost immediately. Roman. Okay. That's simple. No argument. No persuasion. And somehow that hurt too. Zachary. I mean it. Roman. I know. Zachary. Ava thinks there was someone else emotionally. A long pause followed. Then, Roman. She's right. I stared at the screen, feeling hollow. Roman. I never wanted to hurt her. Zachary. You did. Another long pause. Roman. I know. God. Always honest. I hated that about him now because it made it impossible to fully villainize him. And I needed someone to blame besides myself. The next week became torture. Roman disappeared completely. No visits. No texts unless absolutely necessary. Ava noticed immediately. He really vanished. Huh. She muttered one night while washing dishes. I forced myself to stay calm. Maybe he thinks space is healthier. Maybe. She dried her hands slowly. Or maybe he feels guilty. My pulse jumped immediately. For what? Ava looked over at me strangely. For hurting me? Right. Of course. I laughed weakly. Yeah, obviously. But the way she looked at me lingered slightly too long. And for the first time, genuine fear crawled up my spine. Because maybe Ava wasn't stupid. Maybe she'd been putting pieces together quietly this entire time. Saturday evening, someone knocked on the apartment door. The second I opened it and saw Roman standing there, my stomach dropped immediately. What are you doing? He looked tense. More tense than I'd ever seen him. I need to talk to Ava. Ice flooded my chest instantly. What? Roman swallowed hard. I can't keep lying to her. Every thought in my head stopped. No. His eyes snapped to mine. Zachary. No. I stepped into the hallway immediately, pulling the apartment door mostly shut behind me. You cannot tell her. Roman looked wrecked. She already knows something happened emotionally. That's different. Is it? Yes. My voice cracked louder than intended. Inside the apartment, I heard movement. Ava. Roman heard it too. And suddenly both of us looked panicked for the exact same reason. She deserves the truth, he said quietly. I stared at him in horror. You think telling her you fell for her brother is somehow going to help? Pain crossed his face immediately. No. Then why are you here? Roman looked at me for a long moment before answering. Because I can't stand what this is turning us into. That landed brutally hard. Because he was right. The lying. The hiding. The guilt every time Ava smiled at either of us. It was poisoning everything. The apartment door opened behind me suddenly. Roman. Ava's voice. Soft. Confused. I turned around too fast. Ava stood there staring between us both. And immediately I knew something had shifted. Because the look on her face wasn't confusion anymore. It was realization. Small at first. Then devastating all at once. Her eyes moved from me to Roman. Then back again. Neither of us spoke. Which was probably the loudest answer possible. Nobody moved. The hallway felt deathly quiet all of a sudden. Like even the building itself was holding its breath. Ava looked between us again slowly. Roman standing outside the apartment. Me blocking the doorway. Both of us visibly panicked. And worst of all, neither of us denying anything. Oh my God, she whispered. The sound of her voice physically hurt. Ava, I started immediately. Don't. Not loud. Not dramatic. Somehow that made it worse. Her eyes locked onto Roman first. How long? Roman looked shattered already. Ava. How long? She repeated, stronger this time. I'd never heard her voice sound like that before. Roman swallowed once hard. Nothing happened while we were together. Technically true. Emotionally devastating. Ava laughed once under her breath, like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. That is such a specific answer. Nobody spoke, because there wasn't a safe thing left to say anymore. Ava looked at me now, and that was somehow the part that hurt most. Not anger. Not yet. Just disbelief. You? She asked quietly. I felt sick. Ava, I never meant. You're my brother. The way her voice cracked on brother nearly destroyed me. I know. No, clearly you don't. Roman stepped forward slightly. This is my fault. Ava snapped toward him instantly. No, she said sharply. You don't get to protect him right now. That silenced all three of us. Because she was right. I stood there feeling like the worst person alive while my sister tried not to cry directly in front of us. You were both just going to keep lying to me? She asked finally. No, Roman said quietly. I looked at him immediately. Because 5 minutes ago, he'd shown up specifically to tell her. Ava noticed too. You came here to tell me? Roman nodded once. Why? A long silence followed. Then Roman answered with brutal honesty, like always. Because I love you enough not to let you keep blaming yourself for the breakup. That did it. Ava finally started crying. Not loudly, which somehow felt more painful. She covered her mouth with one hand and turned away from both of us immediately. I moved instinctively toward her. She stepped back. That hurt more than anything else so far. Don't, she whispered. Ava, I need you not to touch me right now. Every part of my chest tightened painfully. Roman looked wrecked beside me. This never should have happened, he said quietly. Ava laughed bitterly through tears. Wow, really? Great timing on that realization. He accepted that hit without defending himself. Because there was no defense. I didn't cheat on you physically, he said carefully. Ava looked back at him with pure heartbreak in her face. But you wanted to. Roman couldn't answer. That was answer enough. The silence afterward felt unbearable. Finally, Ava looked at me again. And somehow that was worse than her looking at Roman. Because her expression wasn't just heartbreak. It was betrayal. Deep. Personal. Familial betrayal. Did you kiss him? I closed my eyes briefly. That tiny movement answered for me. Ava inhaled sharply like I'd physically hit her. Oh my God. Ava, I'm sorry. No, she said immediately, crying harder now. No, don't do that. Don't stand there and say sorry like this just happened to you accidentally. She was right. That was the worst part. This wasn't one drunken mistake. This had been growing quietly for months while she trusted both of us completely. I loved you both, she whispered. Roman looked destroyed by that sentence. So did I, he admitted softly. Ava stared at him in disbelief. You still saying things like that is honestly insane. He nodded immediately. I know. God. Even now, he wouldn't lie to make himself look better. I need you both to leave me alone, Ava said finally. I blinked. What? I can't look at either of you right now. Ava. No, her voice broke again. Please. That please shattered me completely. Because suddenly this stopped being about tension or guilt or impossible feelings. Now it was just pain. Real pain. The kind you can't undo afterward no matter how badly you want to. Roman stepped backward first. I'll go. Ava didn't answer him. She just wrapped both arms around herself tightly like she was trying to physically hold herself together. Roman looked at me once before leaving. Not romantic. Not longing. Just devastated. Then he walked away down the hallway without another word. I stayed frozen near the apartment door. Ava still wouldn't look directly at me. You picked him over me, she said quietly. The sentence hit harder than anything else that night. Because I didn't even know how to answer it. And maybe that was answer enough too. Part 10, final. Ava moved out 2 weeks later. Not permanently. At least, that's what she said. I just need space, she told me while packing clothes into a duffel bag without looking directly at me. I stood uselessly in the doorway of her room, feeling hollow. Are you staying with Mia? Yeah. Silence. Then quietly. You don't have to stand there looking guilty the entire time. I almost laughed at that. What expression should I use instead? For the first time in days, Ava's mouth twitched slightly. It disappeared immediately after. I don't know, she admitted. I just know I'm tired. That sentence stayed with me after she left. Because tired was exactly what all of this had become. Not dramatic anymore. Not forbidden or exciting or emotionally overwhelming. Just exhausting. The apartment felt wrong without her. Too quiet. Roman hadn't contacted me again after our last conversation. Honestly, I thought maybe that was it. Maybe the universe had finally forced both of us to let this go before it destroyed anything else. Part of me thought that would have been fair. Then, 3 nights after Ava left, someone knocked on the apartment door. I already knew. Roman stood there looking just as tired as I felt. Neither of us spoke immediately. You shouldn't be here, I said softly. Probably not. Still, neither of us moved. Roman looked past me briefly into the apartment. She gone. For now. Pain crossed his face immediately. She hates me. I leaned against the doorway tiredly. She hates both of us. He nodded once like he expected that. A long silence followed. Then Roman finally looked directly at me. I tried staying away. My pulse jumped painfully anyway. Roman, I know. He rubbed a hand over his face. I just needed to see you once when we weren't hiding anymore. That hit hard. Because for the first time since all this started, there was no sneaking now. No lying. No pretending this thing didn't exist. Just consequences. I stepped aside slowly. Roman walked in carefully like he wasn't sure he still deserved to be there. Honestly, maybe neither of us did. The apartment felt strange with him inside it now. Like too many memories existed in the walls. Roman noticed the silence immediately. It feels different. Yeah. He looked around slowly before settling his eyes back on me. I miss her. The honesty of that nearly knocked the air out of me. Not because I doubted it. Because I believed it completely. I know, I admitted quietly. Roman swallowed hard. But I miss you too. There it was. The impossible truth underneath everything. He had loved Ava. And somehow still fallen for me anyway. Life would have been simpler if that made him a liar or manipulator. But Roman had never lied about his feelings once he understood them himself. Which almost made this tragedy worse. I don't know what we're supposed to do now, I admitted. Neither do I. We stood there in silence for a while. No touching. No kissing. Just exhaustion and honesty and months of unresolved feelings sitting between us. Finally, Roman spoke quietly. If being with me costs you your sister forever, then I'll leave right now. I looked at him immediately and realized he meant it. No games. No pressure. He looked heartbroken already just offering it. You do that? Yes. The answer came too fast to fake. Roman stepped closer slowly. Not enough to touch. Just enough that I could see how tired his eyes looked. I never wanted to take anything from you, he said softly. Especially not family. God, that nearly destroyed me. Because despite everything, despite how badly we handled all of this, I still knew Roman was a good person. Flawed. Confused. Selfish sometimes. But good. And maybe that was what made losing Ava hurt him so much too. I talked to her yesterday, I admitted quietly. Roman's expression tightened instantly. How was she? Still angry. Fair. But I hesitated. Roman waited carefully. She said eventually she thinks she'll forgive me. Hope flickered briefly across his face before he shut it down immediately. What about me? I looked down for a second. She doesn't know. Roman nodded slowly. And suddenly I realized something important. For all the pain between them now, Roman still cared more about Ava's healing than about getting me. That mattered. More than I wanted it to. I told her I loved you. I admitted before I could stop myself. Roman froze completely. The apartment went silent. You did. I nodded once. Roman stared at me like the air had left his lungs. Then, very quietly, Zachary. I figured she deserved the truth eventually. He looked overwhelmed in a way I'd never seen before. Not guilty this time. Not conflicted. Just emotional. I love you too, he admitted softly. Hearing it out loud felt nothing like I imagined. Not triumphant. Not romantic. Heavy. Real. Because love wasn't enough to erase what happened. But it was still there anyway. Roman stepped closer one final time. Careful. Giving me room to move away if I wanted. I didn't. When he kissed me this time, it felt completely different from before. Not desperate. Not forbidden. Just honest. And honestly, that made it scarier than anything else. Later that night, after Roman fell asleep beside me for the first time without secrecy hanging over us, I lay awake staring at the ceiling thinking about Ava. About family. About love. About how people can hurt each other without ever meaning to. I didn't know what happened next. Maybe Ava would forgive us eventually. Maybe she wouldn't. Maybe Roman and I would survive the guilt attached to how we started. Maybe we wouldn't. But one thing had become impossible to deny anymore. Some feelings arrive quietly. Slowly. Wrong at first. And by the time you realize how dangerous they already feel like home.